Okay, buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start the press conference. You know the drill. If you need to ask a question, raise the hand or write in the chat box. First question. Howard News.
Hi, two questions. First one for Yaresco. Do you have any regrets in this final chapter of your chief executive? And the second one will be for Mr. Skill, but I would like to hear first Ms. Yaresco.
I only regret that.
Mike?
My only regret would be that there aren't more than 24 hours in a day. I wish we could have done even more in the 5 years that we had, but you still have more time to keep working. I see, as I said, that several of my colleagues, my team members, look down because if there were more than 24 hours in a day, their lives would be even more complicated. But no, I don't have any regrets. I think the board has always done what's been in the best interest of Puerto Rico. We've been responsive, we've been flexible, we've been thoughtful, we've been always keeping the people of Puerto Rico as the North Star. And for that, I'm grateful and very appreciative, and I'm very proud of the work we've done.
The question for Mr. Skill will be if you are willing to reconsider the proposition from the governor about using funds from the emergency fund to mitigate the price hike in the PREPA uses of fuel.
We've already, well, first thing that I'll say is we share the governor's concerns about the effect on prices, and particularly the increase in prices and costs and the impact that that has on the most vulnerable Puerto Ricans. So we fully support efforts to try to alleviate the hardship on vulnerable Puerto Ricans. Our problem with the governor's request, as we said very clearly in our letter, is it's not an appropriate use of emergency funds. And we need to protect vulnerable Puerto Ricans, but we need to use it, we need to do it with available funds and not by misusing funds that are meant for other purposes.
Okay. Next question, Telemundo. Silvia.
It was on the same line. Can you explain what would be correct uses of that emergency fund and why this is not a proper use?
Sure, I'll help. First of all, the emergency fund is really for natural disasters, and it's really for things that are unexpected, that have a very short period of time when you have to use your own money before, for example, FEMA will step in and support you. What we're seeing with the energy prices is not a natural disaster, and it's unfortunately not necessarily a short-term problem. It may actually be followed with high inflation in food prices. It may be followed by high inflation in steel prices and construction. So this is not something that you can take and use your emergency reserve for. There are federal programs, as we noted in our first letter, that are specifically for low-income households to receive support and help during times like this that are so incredibly difficult. Those should be the first response. But subsidizing the energy price for all of consumers is something that is likely to be not good policy. Not good policy because you're then encouraging people to continue using fossil fuels, as fossil fuels are the problem on the island. Number two, extremely expensive. To target it at those in need makes some sense, and that's how the federal programs are working. But to try and subsidize everyone will be not affordable. And you'll find yourself running out of this emergency fund, and then a hurricane hits in September, and we have nothing to deal with that. So to some extent, the federal funds need to serve the lower income households that are suffering and have no other support. And then energy efficiency really needs to be the second part of this. We need to shut off the air conditioning. We need to stop using as much in fossil fuels, and we need to press PREPA to continue doing the work on renewables and move us out of fossil fuels as quickly as is reasonable possible.
Okay, next question, Waba. Julio.
Hi, how are you? The question is for Ms. Yaresco. even though the work you've done has had a lot to do with cuts and the re-engineering of the government, there's people always asking about the part of economical development. Do you regret not having developed an economic development plan with the board so far?
So I believe the very basis of any economic development plan is in the fiscal plan. It's 5 structural reforms without which you cannot really build an economy in Puerto Rico. Number 1, improving education in the public education system. As long as we have 290,000 children who are not getting the best possible education, we are not creating the skill sets for the people of Puerto Rico to take the jobs of the future. Second, human capital and labor. Again, right now, construction firms all over Puerto Rico are looking for skilled labor to do the work that FEMA's paying for, and we don't have enough people with the skill sets. We need to retrain and provide people the skills that are needed in today's economy, and we need to get more people with the EITC that we described and other policies back into the formal workforce. Number 3, electricity. You're not going to build an economy until we have more reliable and affordable electricity, and that's what all the things we talked about today are about. Number 4, ease of doing business. We talked about the RFP for the renewables, critically important. But for renewables to have an effect, all of them have to get permits from the government. So an efficient permitting system, efficient administration of taxes, all the things that matter to businesses, we need to be best in class, best in the world. We are competing for every dollar with everyone else. We're competing for every Puerto Rico investment dollar. Puerto Ricans get to decide whether they want to invest here or Florida. We're competing for every pharmaceutical dollar. They decide between Ireland, Singapore, and Puerto Rico. We're competing for every tourism dollar with Costa Rica, Dominican, Florida. We have to be best in class in all that we do. And so those 5 structural reforms are the very basis of any economic development plan. Without those things, the rest won't really make a difference. So the board has always been focused on economic development, but at the very core, at the very basic level, that's reflected in those fiscal plans.
The next question is regarding the University of Puerto Rico. The president of the university have stated that the university cannot afford more cuts, and the effects on the cuts have been discussed publicly, especially regarding the letter from the Middle States saying that the university needs to prove that it's got the sufficient funds, and it's got till September. The president is saying that cuts should stop. You want to insist in cuts in the university in the near future?
So I don't want to ever insist on cuts, and that's not the role that the board's played. That's really not what we've done with the University of Puerto Rico. And I feel like people are consistently misunderstanding. Whatever reduction there was in the subsidy from the Commonwealth to the university was supposed to be affecting only the back office of the university. Never were there reductions in teaching staff or in payroll for teaching staff or in student services, never in 5 years. The reduction in the subsidy was supposed to be dealt with in 2 ways. 1, raising other revenues, partly tuition, partly research grants, and partly donations from alumni, something that is very traditional with universities. Some of that has been done by the University of Puerto Rico, but not enough. They need to diversify and increase their revenues. Number 2, reduce costs, not in teaching, not in student services, not in eliminating any campuses. Keep all 11 campuses, just consolidate registrar, procurement, accounting, the back office. Instead of having 11 of everything, have 5 or 4 or whatever the university wants to do. The budget that is certified by this board each year does not have the detail of each campus, and it does not have the detail of the School of Neurosurgery at that level. And so if today there's a challenge with accreditation, it needs to be resolved by making that a priority within the budget that the university has. We can't tell you, but we don't have that visibility, that level of detail, into where the university management is distributing the budget that it has between the different schools, between the different campuses, amongst the different programs. And so we can't even respond in a way because we don't have the level of detail and numbers to determine why this ever happened.
So you deny what a lot of people inside the university community says constantly about supposed agenda to destroy the university?
I completely disagree. The agenda was solely to make the university stronger, diversify its revenues, focus on teaching, not on bureaucracy. And if there's anything that happened over 5 years, it's that the bureaucracy didn't change. There's still 11 of everything. There's all 11 back offices. And so it wasn't, the reduction in the government subsidy wasn't matched with the actions in the back office that need to happen so that nothing in teaching gets touched, nothing in student services gets touched, and 11 campuses flourish and continue to be the center in many of the towns where they're located, in Tuado, for example, the center of economic development and the center of academic excellence.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I add?
Don wanted to, say something.
You know, I spent 5 years in a Division I university as a vice president for administrative services. I supervised many of these functions that we've been talking about as a board. At no time has any board member felt or even had the inclination or thought or idea to do anything that would impact a student's success in a university, right? Universities are here to educate students. We believe, I for one strongly believe, and I know my fellow board members agree with me, that a strong UPR is absolutely critical for the future of Puerto Rico. Any business that's looking to relocate to the island is looking towards the strength of the university system and the education system to make sure they can have a well-trained workforce. So I would never ever vote for something that I would think would impact a frontline student and his or her educational opportunities. But when you look at the bureaucracy and the back-end functions, which I've dealt with personally for several years, we can do better. The resistance has been to make any of those decisions to actually start working together and to consolidate, as Ms. Jaresko said. And that's what we're after. No, but it's all just administrative on the administrative side, has nothing to do with the academics or the research mission of the university.
No. Next question, primera hora.
Jaresko, you can speak about your future. You said already that you stay in the island.
I will be on the island. My daughter's in high school and graduating, so I'm going to be here through her graduation later this year. I don't have another job, so I'm not going. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I can tell you that I'm going to spend all my new time, all my free time, right now trying to end the war in Ukraine. So I'm going to be doing everything I can as a volunteer trying to end the war.
Kevin Med. He's
All
online.
right, thanks.
Yes.
First of all, just Godspeed to you, Mr. Esco. You're going to be missed. Second of all, as the board searches for your replacement, and you've got PREPA mediation coming up soon, with you leaving, who's in a position to sort of lead the oversight board's effort in that mediation? Is it going to be members of the board, staffers, outside counsel? Who will take the lead in the mediation negotiation toward a new PREPA deal?
So I'll speak from my perspective. We work as a team. We have our own team, which is going to be led by Alejandro Figueroa, our infrastructure director. We have a team of advisors. And we have the board that makes the decisions, determines policy, makes the final, is responsible for, has the only authority and is responsible for decision making. And all together, we will get through this. You don't need me to get through this successfully. The team of both on our staff, Alejandro and his team, as well as all of our advisors, as well as the wealth of experience, dedication right here at this table, I'm sure it's going to go extraordinarily well.
You will be missed, though.
Thanks.
I would just
Okay, next question.
Justin wanted.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would just say I totally agree with all that, but as we were in the Commonwealth negotiations, members of the board will be directly engaged as well.
Next question. I think I see a raised hand. OS is Oscar Serrano.
Yes, good morning. How are you? Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes, good morning to all again. Regarding, I have a couple of questions, but starting with PREPA, which is the last subject you discussed. Some members of the legislature think that the HTA ruling as to bondholders' capacity to access other taxes related to roads applies to PREPA. And they believe that bondholders could only access existing account balances and not future revenue. I would like someone to address that and also to explain what will be on the table if no agreement is reached in terms of bondholders' rights and how they could assert those rights.
So we're not going to discuss the legal issues, which always are debated in the courtroom, and so I'm going to leave your first question out. In terms of your second question, I think the judge has laid it out for us. So the judge has said we either bring her a plan of adjustment on May 2nd or inform her of a path on litigation or explain to her why she shouldn't lift the stay in terms of Title III. So I think the judge has outlined what the options are. Right now, the goal of the board is very clear. We've stated it in our statements to the court that you've seen, which is to enter in good faith that mediation and try and reach a consensual agreement with as many parties as possible.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chairman, one for you. Ms. Yaresco was holding also in an interim manner the position of revitalization director under Title V. I wonder if, as you search for her replacement, you will be also searching for a person that will separately fill that position, and if that section of the law will ever be actively executed. It seems to be dormant.
So the answer to your first question about whether we will be looking for a replacement as the revitalization coordinator is yes. We're underway with that search. We'll do a thorough search. We will replace Natalie in that role as soon as we can. And my hope is that we will the revitalization coordinator will actively use Title V of PROMESA. There have been a variety of reasons why there haven't been more Title V programs in the past, many of them related to Hurricane Maria and the role that federal disaster funding has played in the economy. But we will fill that position, and we are hopeful that the coordinator will do her or his job, and we'll have lots of projects that will come through that.
If I may. Voy a hablar en español.
I will speak in Spanish. Definitely, it seems to me that it's a moment that, as a board, we have to take advantage of it to identify new resources, but also given the approval of the adjustment plan, it is a moment that we have to, let's say, to make some changes and focus on the economic growth, to focus on all the forms in which PROMESA allows us to develop programs and work with the administration to help the economic growth of Puerto Rico. Just like in education, as in priority projects from Title V, as in PREPA, and some of the other areas in the government, we have to work together to take Puerto Rico to economic growth that is sustainable for the long term. And it seems to me that we have a great opportunities in which we have restructured that. We went from the implementation of the adjustment plan. We are outside of that, and now is the moment to focus on the economic growth.
Next question.
Próxima pregunta, vocero.
Greetings to all. I was wondering if you could expand on why Title V wasn't used as much as, well, we all expected, and also I would like a comment from Mr. Esco on Title V in general. Why wasn't it used so far?
Sure. Historically, Title V is very narrowly worded in the law in terms of what qualifies. And the initial interest in Title V came from a wide variety of renewable projects on the island. So the original applications that we received 5 years ago, prior to the hurricane, were in the energy area. What we decided at that time, the board decided at that time, was that those energy projects needed to either be accepted or rejected at PREPA before we could designate them as critical or non-critical under the law. And then PREPA took years to make its determination with regard to those renewables, which, as you know, then ended up with 16 being proposed for going forward, and then the board didn't approve all of them, approved, I think, 4, and 2 out of the 16, and then the others were rejected in the Title III court, so rightfully, they never made it to critical project status because they weren't even accepted by PREPA to move forward at all. Then the hurricane hit. And after the hurricane hit, the concept or the demand for Title V died down to almost nothing. And the reason for that is because right now the island is focusing on FEMA and CDBG DR money going into infrastructure. And so it's, in a sense, displaced or pushed out what might be private sector interest. The law requires it to be private. You can't be using FEMA money and be in Title V. So given the amount of money, and now the infrastructure bill this past Congress, all of that is federal funded rebuilding of the island's infrastructure. There's very little demand for private sector investment into infrastructure. Remember, it's a very narrow definition in the law of what qualifies. What's changed and why I think the future is much more hopeful for Title V is that now that PREPA has gone through its processes and is going forward with renewable contracts, including the ones that we announced today, all of them are private sector infrastructure qualifying. They could apply for Title V support with accelerated permitting. So I think going forward, I'm pretty sure that's what Antonio said, going forward, there's going to be, I believe, more demand specifically in the energy renewable space. The timing before didn't work because things had to go through PREPA and the court process. Now that court process is over, the exception or rejection of old existing renewables, plus all of the new renewable contracts are now moving forward, or with the RFPs will move forward. So I think now is a time when you will start to see that. I don't think you're going to see massive private investment in other infrastructure because we haven't yet utilized all that federal money. And that's going to be the first order of business, whether it's roads or bridges, it's going to be federally funded, which is not part of Title V.
I had a few questions.
Go ahead.
Is there any update on the audited financials situation? Has the government provided any update on that?
Yes, they're making continuous progress. They're very, very committed. The CFO, Secretary Perez, is very committed to getting them done as soon as possible. The one that we expect any day, or we expected in January, I believe, we had to wait for the effective date. There's something in audits called the going concern clause, and so the auditors had to watch and wait and see and rewrite a lot of the going concern portion based on March 15th, which was the successful effective date of the plan. I think the Hacienda, the Secretary, has made it an absolute priority to move forward on the audited statements. I think you're going to see the next one, Hederman, it's 19, fiscal year 19 any day now. And then rapidly thereafter, 20. His target is to be caught up, let's call it, on a best practices basis so that the fiscal year 22 audit would be done in calendar year 23, right?
I think we have one more question from Oscar.
Yes, thank you for the chance. This is for Ms. Yaresco. You said that you will apply future free time to the war efforts in Ukraine. I wonder if you could give us a more detailed view of exactly what you will be doing for those efforts.
What or why?
No, not why. I
Okay.
understand why.
Well,
What?
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 Okay.
What?
So the first thing is I'm not going back to Ukraine right now. So I've been asked that in the hallways already today. I'm not a gun person, so I'm not of any assistance on the ground in Ukraine. People who know how to use guns are needed in Ukraine. I can help through my work with the media. I do an awful lot of interviews. I do a lot of podcasts, specifically talking about the financial and economic sanctions and financial and economic actions that governments, business, and we as individuals can take to isolate the Russian economy and put pressure on Putin to end the war now. The second thing that I do is I work with my colleagues and my contacts that I have in Washington, D.C., and in other G7, other Western European capitals to try and encourage the same kind of thing. Massive, greater sanctions by every government across both institutions in Russia and Belarus, as well as individuals in Russia and Belarus. And I help with trying to think through how we can best isolate that economy. I do a lot of public speaking in front of companies who are deciding whether or not to leave the market, whether or not to stay or leave, and why they should leave. I have a massive number of distant family and friends in Ukraine and as refugees. I help them find homes. I help them cope with the daily bombings. They have someone to talk to. They have someone to call when they can. I help raise money for humanitarian and military support. I try to make sure that everyone can give money when they want to for the purpose that they believe in. Again, medicine, refugees, people in the country, military, to organizations that are trustworthy, verified, and effective, because there are a lot who can take money that don't know how to put it to work. I'm spending a lot of time thinking through the lessons I've learned in Puerto Rico after the hurricane, and how rebuilding this island, how hard it's been to rebuild this island, and what that means to rebuilding a country that's 66 times larger. Puerto Rico is 1/66 the size of Ukraine. And the damage and the destruction continues every day. And so I'm spending a lot of time trying to think through the lessons we learned here and how to apply them in a place that's significantly been damaged. So trying to use my experience, my contacts, my every waking hour to do whatever I can to help.
Thank you. And I have one more question and we are finished.
Yeah. The legislature is passing a bill, or at least in the process of passing a bill to establish a moratorium on the fuel tax. Recently, the board wrote back to Senator Zaragoza regarding the measure. There's a $20 million fiscal impact. I was wondering if there's an alternative to that. What are your thoughts?
It's the same with every piece of legislation, to be clear. Legislation is proposed to either spend incremental money or reduce revenues, and it doesn't have the other side. Like, if that happens, then what, right? And so legislation needs to come with both sides of the equation. If you're going to reduce these revenues, then are you going to reduce some costs? Or are you going to increase other revenues? But how are we going to make that up? Because everything in the budget has been divided up. It has a spending, there are priorities, people get paid. Are we going to stop paying someone when we don't get that revenue? I mean, so the issue isn't a policy issue. It's really fiscal neutrality, revenue neutrality. And I think the letter to Senator Zaragoza said we are ready, the board is always ready, to sit down and talk through any and all options that might make something revenue neutral or fiscally neutral.
Okay. No more questions. Thank you so much.